Ladies and gentlemen, tragically this time, I have to speak on the murder of Michael Brown, 18-year-old black male in Ferguson, Missouri, by none other than this guy. His name is Darren Wilson, claims to be 28 years old. He looks a lot older, but that's what he claims. And from the witnesses that I've heard, and from what Chief Jackson said initially, Darren Wilson had no knowledge about this alleged robbery that Michael Brown was supposed to have participated in. However, the chief said that he encountered Michael Brown and Dorian Johnson walking in the middle of the street. And according to Dorian Johnson, Wilson said, "Get the fuck out of the road. Get on the fucking sidewalk." And he came at these young people with disrespect. And apparently Michael Brown told him to go fuck himself. And then it was on. Escalated into a tussling match. And Wilson, obviously a man of slight build, couldn't do anything with the 6'4", 6'5" Michael Brown, who weighed around 300 pounds, between 290 and 300 pounds. Guy probably played football his senior year. And this little slight punk couldn't do anything with him, and they tussled, and Mr. Brown was outside the car, Wilson was inside, and apparently they tussled through the window. And Wilson claims that he got roughed up by Mr. Brown, but I find that highly dubious. In any event, he came out of the car angry, lost his poise, and he pulled out his gun and started shooting. Now, Mr. Brown was, according to eyewitnesses, 35 to 40 feet away from the patrol car at that point. He came out shooting. The autopsy shows that Mr. Brown was struck 6 times. Once in the eye, I think his right eye, and once in the top of his skull. And the only way he could have gotten that shot into the top of the skull is that Michael Brown was either on the ground or on his way down to the ground. Mr. Wilson shot him with a 9mm automatic handgun, and those 9 or 10 bullets probably emptied his clip in a matter of seconds. He knew that Mr. Brown was unarmed. Mr. Brown turned around with his hands up in the air and said he was unarmed and that he surrendered. And Wilson kept shooting until he was dead. That's premeditated murder. A lot of people think that premeditated murder is something that you have to plan weeks or days in advance. You can premeditate a murder in as little as 30 seconds or less. Once you make up your mind to kill somebody, if it's 10 seconds before you do it, that's premeditated murder. And that's what this so-called officer did. Now, the chief talks about, he's been with the department for 4 years, has been an exemplary officer and all of that. No, he was not exemplary. There has to be a way to evaluate these people to determine their racist attitudes. And if they are racist, this is a multi-racial society, pluralistic society, and I guess you can't hire, except maybe in some towns where no minorities live, you can't work for a police force and not encounter minorities. And even if you do live in a town that's all white, some minorities are going to pass through that town at some point. And you have to treat everybody the same. 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution says everybody must be treated the same under the law. That's what they call the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And if you cannot abide by that, then you really don't need to be in public safety. The United States is not just white folks. It's all kinds of folks. And if you can't accept that, then you really don't need to be working as a law enforcement officer. So that is what happened. Now today on the radio, some girl claims that he told her that Mike Brown bum rushed him, and that's when he pulled the trigger. Well, hell, she's his friend, probably his girlfriend, and he planted that story with her, and someone was saying that's the same story he told the Ferguson Police Department. Of course, it's going to be the same story. He's not going to tell the police that the guy bomb rushed him, and that's why he shot, when he knows it was first-degree murder, and he's not going to tell the girl that. He'll tell everybody the same story. The jury will never hear this. This is hearsay, not within any exception. Sometimes hearsay is admissible in the court, but not with this. She was not an eyewitness. She doesn't know what happened. All she knows are the lies that he told her. The jury will never hear that. But however, because she was on the radio, everybody in the nation has heard about it, because it's on, all the cable news stations and the big network stations. So even if they don't hear it in the courtroom, they've heard it on the news. And maybe that plants a seed of doubt in a potential juror's mind, and that's what this is all about. It's inevitable that Wilson will be charged, perhaps by the state, as well as the federal government for civil rights violations, but that trial should not be held in St. Louis County. The state cannot get a fair trial in St. Louis County. It's a hotbed of prejudice. I went to law school in St. Louis almost 20 years ago. I came from Los Angeles to attend law school at SLU, St. Louis University, for those of you who are not familiar with the acronym. And I was warned when I got there not to ever leave St. Louis City. If I did go shopping at the malls in St. Louis County, to be back inside the city limits of St. Louis by night. I never violated that rule. And I completed my law school studies there in 2.5 years and got the hell out of there. And I haven't set foot back in there. I do plan to revisit St. Louis at some time. I recently learned that the grave of Dred Scott is in St. Louis, and I want to visit his grave and see some other places in St. Louis that I haven't seen, and some people that I haven't seen in a long time. But you people of Missouri, you got an election coming up on March the 4th. Y'all need to clean house of some people. That district attorney in St. Louis County, McConnell, needs to be removed from office. He's biased. He will never do his job to prosecute this killer, this cold-blooded murderer. The trial needs to be moved across state to Jackson County, which is where Kansas City is located, and that's where the trial should be held. And a special prosecutor needs to be appointed by the governor or the attorney general. And there are lots of good people in Missouri of all races. Not all folks from Missouri, white folks from Missouri, are racist. Not all white folks from anywhere are racist. But when the good people, when the righteous people stay silent and allow the unrighteous to carry the day, it gives the entire state, it gives the United States a bad name. If we don't do right in this particular case, and the case in New York where Eric Garner was choked to death by several police officers, and they shouldn't just blame the one that had the hammerlock around his neck, because he was asphyxiated in two ways: compression of the neck and compression of his diaphragm. Even if nobody had a hold on his neck, he would have died anyway because they had compressed his diaphragm. And for those of you who don't know anatomy, the diaphragm is the muscle that allows you to breathe. It forces your lungs to inhale and exhale. So if somebody compresses it, it will stop working and you will suffocate. So more than one officer, ex-officer in the case of New York, needs to be indicted and prosecuted for the death of Eric Garner. And then, of course, there's the black woman that the California Highway Patrolman knocked down. He straddled her and punched her as hard as I've ever seen anybody punch a man. And just because she didn't comply with his order. What is wrong with these people? Where does all that hate come from? Is it genetic? Is it in the DNA? I really would like to understand it. Maybe someone can help me with that. But in any event, I digress. Let's get back to this case at hand and make your feelings known. Let your congressman know, or whatever, that something needs to be done. First of all, the federal government needs to pass a federal murder law. For these states who can't deliver justice in egregious and outrageous cases like this, then the government should be able to file federal murder charges against anybody, whether it's a policeman or a private citizen. If we had had such a law when Trayvon Martin was murdered, then perhaps he should have been tried in federal court. in which case they might have even been able to move that case out of Florida altogether to another U.S. District Court in another state, or maybe in Washington, D.C. But we have to do something to send a message that we're not going to tolerate murders of people simply because they're not white. The world is not white. The majority of the world is not white. We have to learn to tolerate one another. And that's all I have for now, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll talk to you next time.